Good morning, folks. We are live. I am here. I'm not late, but I haven't got my promo video this morning. And that's because I uploaded it yesterday. And for some reason, the company that I use has taken it down. So I couldn't find it. So that's a little bit of a problem, but never mind. We are here. We are live. It's 8:30. This is your property news live. Now, today, stick around because we have got a special guest with us today. And we've got Julie Ford, who's going to talk to us a little bit about evictions and what you can and what you can't do. Now, it's been really confusing, hasn't it? So let me turn this light off. Bear with me a second. This is live. This is just what happens when it's live. It stops the flickering, that's all. It's been really confusing, folks, hasn't it, over the last few months, with the government deciding to put, sort of bans on this and bans on that, then the 6 month this, and then the 6 month that, and then tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then all of a sudden now bailiffs can't go. It's just, nobody really knows what they're doing. So Julie's behind the scenes. I can see her. Hello, Julie. A little wave. You can't see her yet, but I can. And Julie's going to talk to us a little bit about what you can and what you can't do. But before we go ahead with any of that, you've got to say hi. And you've got to tell us where we're from, okay? Or where you're from. I know where I'm from. So first of all, good morning, Paz from Brighton. Good morning to Sarah from Lymington. Good morning, Michael, watching from Devon. And Mario, you were watching from London. Good morning, Mikhail from, it doesn't say where you're from. Good morning, Andrew from Lincoln, just watching your YouTube Worcester walkabout. Cool. Decided to do that just to do a little bit different. If you haven't seen that, folks, head over to my YouTube channel. I did a report on all of the shops that are closed down in Worcester. And it's quite depressing, actually, but it opens up, the truth about what's actually happening out there. Head over to my YouTube channel, have a look at that. Good morning, Grayson, watching from Essex, and Steve from South Devon. Sarah, watching from Swansea on YouTube. Good morning, Atonis, watching from Farnborough, and just says Facebook user. Tracy from Loughborough, good morning. Good morning, Frank from Greenwich. Good morning to Andrew. Mr. Fritz, the dog, has just joined you. And Glenn, good morning from Wolverhampton. Okay, folks, so those are the shout outs. We can't do shout outs all day. I'd love to, but we can't. All right, so today the theme is about evictions. And I want you to stick around because Julie's waiting and we're going to bring Julie live in a second. So if you've got any questions for Julie as well, let's keep this interactive as much as we can. So the first thing on the news today then, a law firm has revealed the scale of the backlog in possession cases which cannot be pursued to eviction because of government restrictions. After the lengthy eviction ban over the spring and the summer, the government early last month asked, and just remember that word asked, bailiff organisations not to undertake any evictions in areas that are classified as tier 2 or tier 3 under current COVID alert systems. On November the 5th, it asked bailiff organisations not to undertake any evictions during the English lockdown, with only a few exceptions. Now, Legal for Landlords, just one of hundreds of legal operations, get my teeth back in, representing buy-to-let investors, has told Landlord today it is currently working with no fewer than 64 landlords whose hearings for March, April and May were all cancelled. They were forced to submit reactivation notices for the cases to be continued, but are still waiting for the court to provide a date. A further 112 cases have been issued at court without an update in response, and 53 bailiff appointments are still not set. The company is also dealing with 55 High Court enforcement cases which officers are unable to attend to collect rent due as the properties are in tiers 2 and tier 3. Now with lockdown extended across the UK, it says that these figures will rise further. So let's bring Julie on. Good morning, Julie. Good morning, Julie. Can you hear us?
Yeah, good morning, Rick.
Good morning, you are live. So Julie, today is about evictions. Today is about the confusion that we've been going through over the last few months. And now, there are legal firms now reporting that this government request that bailiffs can't go and evict people now between December is it between now and December the 11th? Or, no, December the 11th and January the 11th. It's all really confusing. So what I'd like to do, Julie, is we're going to have this as a bit of an open forum. So first of all, my question to you is, and for everyone that's watching, can we still evict people? What's happening? What's the process?
So the answer to that is yes, you can still evict people. The thing is, you're not actually going to get all the way to the actual eviction being carried out. That's the problem. So you can still serve notice, you can still serve your Section 21, your Section 8, you can still apply to the court and actually have your possession claims set in the court. And you can then, if the tenant doesn't leave, apply for your warrant of possession and your warrant. The problem is, once you get to eviction warrant, that's where it all stops. So at the moment with this second lockdown, we have no evictions happening from the November to the 2nd of December. Then we've got a little gap where we've got a window, and then we've got the Christmas ban, which will be the 11th of December to the 11th of January.
Okay, struggling with the internet, Julie. You keep freezing. I'm not sure if it's my side or your side. So I think I got most of that. So what can we say to people now that are looking to evict tenants? How long, on average, is it going to take? If notice is served today, what's the expectation?
The expectation, if you're serving notice today, let's say you're using a Section 21, which is 6 months notice, by the time you've gone through all of the process, which now we've got new review hearings, we've got possession hearings, you're probably looking with an additional lockdown 18 months.
18 months to evict the tenant. So what is going to happen, Julie, then, is if... Oh, I'm getting a little bit of feedback myself now, sorry. So if we have got a tenant that is not paying and it's going to take 18 months to get them out, what are the options available to landlords? What can they do lawfully?
So lawfully, they can communicate with their tenants and find out if the tenant would just want to leave, in which case you can sign a deed of surrender, and that releases the tenant from the tenancy agreement and dissolves all of their responsibility for rent from that date onwards. Some landlords are choosing to pay their tenants to leave. That's obviously legal as well. But the other option is not going down the eviction route at all and actually looking at money claim online. So you're actually just going after the tenant in the same way that you would if you were a credit card company or something like that, going after someone that hadn't paid their credit card. You just then ask the tenant to pay against the arrears and the money that they owe, but you're not actually the property.
Okay, we are really struggling, Julie, with your internet connection. A couple of comments have just come in as well to say the same. So I'm not sure if you can still hear me. You just mentioned money claim. Are you still with us, Julie? You've frozen altogether now. No, we've gone. We've lost you. All right, no problem. Sorry, Julie. I'm afraid that we have lost your internet connection, but thank you for joining us. I'm not sure what's happened there. So what I would say, Julie, is if you could perhaps add into the comments because we've lost you completely, you're frozen. My question would be, you mentioned money claim online, which is great, and we've used money claim online quite a lot recently, but this is ongoing, isn't it? So how can you put a money claim online in when you don't know how much you're going to be owed by the tenant? If you we'll do this on the comments because of the internet connection. So let me see if I can bring you back in, Julie. Are you back? Can you hear us? You are, cool. Okay, we've got you back. So I'm not sure if you got my question there. So what can we do if you're going to put a money claim online because if it's going to be 18 months, when do we put that in? Because it's going to be growing. Does that mean we have to submit a new claim every month at the cost of £70? Can you unmute your mic, Julie? I can't hear you. No, we've got no audio now. This is technology for you folks. Isn't it great? All right, let me just put you back into the stream again. No, we've got no audio, Julie. All right, we'll go back to the text. Okay, so if you could answer that and just put the text comment in, I'll be interested to know. Andrew's saying that savvy tenants could really play some mischief with this. They could, couldn't they? Mandy's saying good morning from Manchester. So folks, we are at the lap of the technology gods, and unfortunately, we've lost Julie. We've lost her audio as well. So maybe we could do something tomorrow perhaps, might see if we can get Julie back in. But this is all down to the internet. This is a way forward, isn't it? So if you've got any comments or questions for Julie. So Julie's just been saying now, effectively, it's going to take potentially up to 18 months to evict a tenant. That is absolutely crazy. Julie, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove you from the platform. And then could you remove yourself and then add yourself back in just to see if we can regenerate the internet? That might be an idea. Then we'll see if we can bring you back on. So folks, if you've got any questions for Julie, then let me know. Jack's saying, so weird. I was just asking my business partner about these challenges and how to mitigate them about 15 minutes ago. As if by magic, 2 minutes later, you popped up, Rick. That's what I'm like, it just happens. Mark is saying serve a money claim for each month that is owed. That's what my question is, Mark, because I don't think that is, every money claim you put in is going to cost like £75. So yes, money claim is an option, but I don't see how you could do it every single month because it's going to cost you £75 an application unless you keep adding to it. Let's see if Julie can come back in and see if she's able to rejoin the feed. If she's not, then unfortunately we'll have to leave Julie there for now, for the time being. Okay, so what is next on today's news? So next on today's news, we've got a league table of UK cities where it takes longest for first-time buyers to save for a deposit, may indirectly provide suggestions of a strong rental potential for buy-to-let investors. New research by, my screen's just gone. New research by Coulter's Property has looked at 50 major cities across the UK and compared the average house prices with the average salary to reveal how long it would take on average for a first-time buyer to save up for a deposit. Specifically, this was based on a national 10% deposit of the average local house price and how long it would take if 10% of the average local salary was saved each month. Unsurprisingly, London comes out as the worst place to save up for a deposit, taking on average 24 years and 10 months to get onto the property ladder. It doesn't say when the starting point is because, it's not going to be from the day you're born, surely. Assuming a buyer doesn't get help from other means, such as their parents, Oxford and Cambridge aren't too far behind with 17 to 20 years. But there are other, perhaps more surprising entries in the top 10 high deposit locations, and they were frustrated by buyers that are likely to have to rely on private renting instead. Brighton and Watford take 15 years or more, whilst 5 other locations, Cheltenham, Reading, Slough, Exeter and Bristol, complete the most expensive. Liverpool is the easiest place to save up for a deposit, according to Coulter's, taking just 4 years and 8 months. Stoke-on-Trent isn't far behind, taking an average of 5 years and 11 months to get onto the property ladder. We've got Julie back, folks. Hi, Julie.
Hi there, should we give it another go?
That's much better. You've moved. Okay, cool. So I think where we got to, Julie, was my question to you was, how long is it going to take? So if we serve notice now, how long is it going to take before we can actually evict tenants? And then you replied, probably, by the time you get them out, and if they choose not to leave, about 18 months. So then you went on to say money claim online is a great option, which it is. But how can we put a money claim online in when we don't know what the final bill is that the tenant owes us?
Yeah, that is a big problem because obviously when you put a money claim in online, you are literally doing it with a lump sum. You can't assume any figures moving forward. So it is literally for a landlord to either, juggle whether they're literally putting one in every month or whether they maybe leave it a few months, 3 months, 6 months, and then just put one in for the lump sum and then just write off the rest ahead of that. So it really is a bit of a gamble. You need to work your numbers out when you are putting the money claim in line in deciding at what point you're going to do that.
So, Judy, can you walk us through the process now? So for people that are really confused about this, what do they need to do to evict the tenant? So brand new application, somebody says, right, I've had enough, tenants like messing about, I want to put a section 21 in. Can you walk us through the whole process?
Absolutely. So you will serve a section 21 first of all. So that will be in writing to the tenant in prescribed form using a form 6A. At the moment, that's giving 6 months notice. So once that 6 months notice expires, the tenant doesn't have to leave. This isn't an eviction notice. The landlord must then apply to court. So that's a form that a landlord must fill in, an application to the court, pay the court fee, and the court will then look at the documents that have been provided. Now, due to COVID, we now have a new process in the court. So what you will get is something called a review hearing. So you'll get 14 days notice of this review hearing, and that will be basically something that will happen outside of the court system. So after 5 o'clock at night, the judge will sit there, have a look through all the documents, make sure it's up to scratch, probably have a phone call with you here and there as well, and then decide whether he's going to move forward to a possession hearing. 28 days after the review hearing, you will then get your date for your possession hearing. Your possession hearing gives you opportunity for your tenant to put in a defence, etc., etc. If that all goes smoothly, you'll be awarded your possession order. And then 14 days after the possession order expires, you can apply for your eviction warrant. Once your eviction warrant date has been issued, the tenant will then get 14 days notice of that, and eventually, finally, you get your eviction and the tenant moves out and you get your property back. That's textbook.
That's textbook. In reality, is that really going to happen? Is this going to push people down the route of unlawful evictions?
Absolutely, and it's inevitable that it's going to, and it's not going to be unscrupulous rogue landlords that do it. It's going to be frustrated landlords who feel they have no other option. I've seen letting agents that have started doing illegal evictions, not because they want to, but simply because it's the only option that they're looking at the moment, because eviction just isn't a probability at the moment.
Julie, what about the tenants that are really taking the biscuit? Because I know now furlough's been extended, mortgage holidays have been extended. So if there is a tenant that approaches a landlord and says, look, I'm not paying because of coronavirus, surely because of universal credit, because of the furlough scheme, they should be able to contribute at least something towards their rent, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of clients I've been working with, I haven't come across one tenant yet who who can't pay their rent. Every tenant has got some form of income coming into the household, and it's just about them understanding how to prioritise that. And unfortunately, we seem to have a generation where the roof over their head doesn't seem to be their main priority, and it just seems to be a right for them to have this property without paying for it. But universal credit is there, it's available. Yes, it may not cover the entire market rent that you've got, but it's definitely going to be paying something towards landlords. And the same with furlough. What you have to understand with furlough, if it's paying 80% of your wages, that also means that for that 20% you're not getting, you're also not travelling, you're not paying that, that fiver for your lunch and the coffee at the shop round the corner. All of those things that you're losing on furlough, you're actually stopping from paying out because you're no longer going to work. So it actually balances out. And I don't see, if anyone's on furlough, how they can actually say that they can't afford to pay their rent.
And I fully agree with that. It's getting harder, isn't it? It is getting harder, but I think those that adapt survive. Now, the private rental sector is only going to get stronger because of COVID, because, simply it's going to be the most affordable option. People aren't going to be able to get mortgages. Now, I do know that there are some exceptions with the 6-month notice period, so we can still hopefully expedite cases into the court. What are those exceptions, Julie?
So those exceptions are pre-COVID rent arrears. Now, these fall into two categories. One where the rent arrears is more than 12 months worth of rent, and the other one where the rent arrears equal 25% of the landlord's income. So those will be prioritised. You've also got severe antisocial behaviour, illegal occupation, and fraud is another one, and obviously domestic violence.
Fraud? How are we going to prove someone's being convicted of fraud? Okay. Do you think that these policies are well thought out, Julie? We've got housing ministers that don't understand the law. Why are they in power and they don't actually understand what they're imposing themselves? I mean, we could go off on tangents here. We could talk about Jasmine's law, which I think is, it's just a very ill-conceived prospect and an ill-conceived proposition. Robert Jenrick's been around for a while now. We're not quite used to that, so maybe that's a good thing or a bad thing. We've got some consistency. But, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that these are ill-conceived? Or, I know that the latest government announcement has just been deemed to be unlawful when they have requested that bailiffs don't go and take possession of properties in tier 3 and tier 2 areas around the country. Now, that's not legal, right?
No, exactly. And that's been the problem all the way through with this pandemic, because what people are doing at the moment is, it's a knee-jerk reaction initially, but we've had a lot of time now to consider what impacts are going to be and how we're going to deal with that. So we should be in a better position now to actually put better legislation, temporary legislation in place, but we're not. And the main issue is, which has always been the issue, is every time a new piece of legislation comes in, it's very much in a square box. It doesn't look at the other pieces of legislation that it's going to impact. We found that with the Deregulation Act, it was a bit of a band-aid to the main issue in housing. And this is the problem. We keep getting these little bills and these little acts running through Parliament to change things, but none of them join up. Okay, we are talking about a housing act. Our last housing act was 2004, but that's an awful long time ago when you actually look at how society is and how society has changed in that short space of time. We're still dealing with antiquated acts like the Law of Property Act 1925, the De-stress from Rent Act 1875. There's so many acts that are no longer even relevant to society as today. It's pointless. Keep trying to just add to the legislation. They just need to wipe the slate clean, put it all in the shredder, and just write one up-to-date housing act that just keeps being updated every time society changes.
The Distress from Rent Act. I mean, has anyone actually ever used that? You can charge your tenant double or something ridiculous if they choose not to leave after they've given notice. That's nuts. Okay, we've got a few questions coming in. Mark saying, if you illegally evict, would the tenant be able to even afford to take to court? Mark, it's not about the tenant. So what would happen? Please don't be tempted to do this. If you evict illegally, all it will take is for the tenant to report you to the council, and it will be the council that takes you to court, not the tenant. So I know this is really hard, folks. And my big Facebook group, we've got nearly 19,000 members in that Facebook group. And I can tell you, over the years that I've been running that Facebook group, the amount of people that have said that they've illegally evicted and it's come back and it's bitten them. I've got people in there that have been fined tens of thousands of pounds, and they've come forward and they've openly and honestly said that that's happened because they've illegally evicted. I know it's tough, folks. I know it's tough. But what I would suggest you do, if you are at the point of I have had enough, negotiate your tenant out of the property. Everyone has got a price, and that's what we do. Now, is it worth paying your tenant £1,000, which is quite a lot of money to a lot of people, for them to surrender and sign a deed of surrender just to get them out and to get peace of mind? Then yes, I think it is. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming in. Frank Julie is saying, this is for Julie and all of us. I think it could be interesting to know from a legal expert if it really is true that the eviction ban is not legal. Some companies are claiming this. We could set a crowdfunding of the court case. Well, I hope you've got an appetite for crowdfunding, Frank, to be able to lobby the government, because I know that I've got rooms to fill and businesses to run first, over and above. Julie, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we are going to see a test case come in the Supreme Court. It's going to happen. Somebody is going to do that and put the money behind it. The process itself was illegal because it is supposed to run through Parliament, and it is obviously supposed to run through the correct processes. Parliament was obviously in recess at the time. And a lot of the things that have happened with the Coronavirus Act haven't gone through the correct channels. A lot of this was overlooked, especially by the Master of the Rolls, simply because we were in a pandemic and decisions had to be made. But I think in the long run, yes, there will be test cases come to court, and I think we will see case law made out of this.
Yeah, and I think the fact is, whether it's legal, whether it's not legal, it's a request at the moment, and the external companies that run the bailiffs and and all of the people that do the enforcement have agreed to it. So whether it's legal or not, it's certainly not going to happen right now. Richard's saying, don't you risk being fined a large and surely get a criminal record for unlawful eviction? Yes, you do, Richard. Absolutely. It is not worth it. It absolutely isn't. Now, I'm an ex-police officer, as you know, so obviously I'm always going to be, tipping towards the law and keeping things legal. But you've got to sleep at night. Now, if you unlawfully evict a tenant and they get pissed off with you, it's just going to take one phone call, and then you're going to be investigated by the housing department, and you're potentially going to end up with a conviction. And certainly in times of untested times like this, when we are suffering a housing crisis. Can you imagine Shelter, Acorn, Generation Rent getting on the back of a great story for them when a landlord has unlawfully evicted a tenant? It would go viral, it would be all across the papers, and not only would it do you not an injustice, but it wouldn't do you very good. It would be massive implications for the whole of the private rental sector. Would absolutely. So what else have we got? Rich is also saying, but the fines would be huge for doing the illegal eviction. You risk a criminal record, surely. Yep, just did that one. Sorry, I think that was just a repeat. Okay, any more questions for Julie, folks? So I think finally then, Julie, thank you for coming to join us. What can we think about moving forwards with the whole of the Section 21? Now, it was supposed to be repealed by now. Yeah, we've had bigger and better things to do. Is it still on the horizon? Are we going to lose it? If we're going to lose it, when's it going to happen?
It's definitely still on the horizon. So the Rented Homes Act is still moving through Parliament. However, it doesn't have a second reading until, I believe, the end of February next year. So it's got to work its way through Parliament. Once it's had its second reading, it'll have its committee stage. Then it will move to the House of Lords and it will pass through there. So again, I think you're looking another 18 months to 2 years before that becomes royal assent and becomes law.
Do you think we're going to be going back to the old protected tenancy days, prior to the new Housing Act? Do you think it's going to kind of be the same thing?
I think it's going to be very similar, obviously, because we're going to be using Section 8 from that point moving forward. Section 8 is obviously going to have to be rejigged to ensure there are no fault options for landlords. But yeah, I do think, and again, I do always keep my eye on Scotland, and Scotland obviously did something very similar. They got rid of all of their housing law and just put a new Housing Act in 2017, and they just have one type of tenancy now. So again, it's always worth looking at what Scotland did, because it's often we run very similar to that. And I think moving forward, that's exactly what we'll end up doing.
We've got about 150 tenants. That's what we run on. Now, my story is, we're not massive. We're a decent size. We are quite big in the area that we're in. And we have not really been affected with non-paying tenants. Now, COVID, lockdown 1, we did lose quite a lot of tenants. We lost about 14 because, people just panicked and they ran away. From that point, we began filling rooms again. And over, the last 6 months, and we've gone into lockdown 2, I've not got, that's a lie. I've got one tenant that is in arrears, and they're on a payment plan owing to COVID. Now, that's not to say this is going to be, the same for everybody, and the reason behind that is we just let them go. Because I'd rather have an empty room that I can fill again than a tenant that's going to sit there for a minimum of 6 to 12 months. So our default reaction is when a tenant comes to us and says, look, either I'm not paying or I can't pay, we will then go through the process with them. And we've got a very strict process. First of all, why can't you pay? We need proof to show us why you can't pay. So if you've been laid off, we need your P45. If you're self-employed, we're going to need to see some kind of proof, maybe your most recent accounts or maybe some bank statements to prove that your income is dried up. And if they're not on those scales, those elements, then effectively we're going to signpost them to universal credit. If they're not prepared, and some tenants have said it takes too long, I don't want to go into universal credit. Why wouldn't you? Then we're going to say, well, okay, we've got two choices here. You are contractually obliged to pay because you're in contract or you're on periodic. If you choose not to pay, we can either pursue you through the courts, or as an alternative, we will release you from your contract with no further charges. And 99.9% of them have said, okay, well, thank you. That's a generous offer. I will leave. And then they sign a deed of surrender and off they go. Now, because we've operated that system, we've only got one person that's decided to stay, and we worked a payment plan out with them. And I think, Julie, it's a case of being pragmatic, and it's a case of doing as much as you can, but we've got to future-proof our business as well. So I'm just sort of throwing this out there generally to everyone that's watching is work with your tenants, come up with some kind of agreement, and if it's legal and it's lawful and it's ethical, then if they've got somewhere else to live, we're not going to make them homeless, then it's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. I'd rather have an empty room than a tenant that is not paying because they choose not to, not because they can't. Awesome. Okay, any more questions for Julie? Sarah's saying universal applications are going through quickly. Yeah, I know. But again, it's a case of tenants choosing not to pay because they just choose not to pay rather than they can't pay. Richard's saying, we love you, Rick. Thank you, Richard. Love you too. Awesome. Thank you so much. So, Julie, I want to say thank you on behalf of everybody. That was a great news feed today. We'll catch up again in a few weeks' time. And I don't know what you're doing today, but don't forget, Julie, you've got to have some fun too. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Rick.
Awesome. Let's give Julie some love, folks. Let's say thank you collectively. Julie's given a little bit of time there today. So finally today, folks, landlords have been told that they face another invisible threat beyond coronavirus, and it's under insurance, which apparently is rife in the private rental sector. Data from Rebuild Cost Assessment, which is a web-based insurance company, reveals what it calls a massive shortfall in cover amongst rented homes and business properties. The insurance valuation provider estimates privately rented homes in Britain could be underinsured by a whopping £315 billion. While for UK commercial property, the underinsurance total is around £325 billion. They say, I fear that in the current financial climate, many property owners simply would not survive the consequences of underinsurance. His firm estimates that overall some 79% of property in the UK is underinsured, typically insured for an average of 69% of their worth. Now, this is a really big thing, folks, because I know that a lot of policies, if you don't check them, will only insure you for £5,000 worth of malicious damage. Now, if your tenant goes in and burns a property down knowingly, and they do it on purpose, then potentially you're only going to get £5,000 worth of rebuild costs. So check your policies, make sure now we're going into winter, make sure that it's all covered, because you've got to make, I mean, it might cost you a little bit more, but better to have that peace of mind. Lots of people saying thank you. Lots of people saying thank you to Julie. Folks, that's it from me today. Hope you enjoyed that. A little bit different today. I'm going to try and bring a few guests on as we move forwards with the news feed into the new year. So if you've got any suggestions, please let me know. Don't forget to click on that follow, subscribe button, whatever you have to do. And I'll see you back here tomorrow at 8:30. Don't be late. Put it in your diary. And don't forget to have a little bit of fun. Take care.